But hey everybody, welcome back to Talking Time with Caffeine, the only podcast where I have no idea what's happening half the time. Today, my guest is, introduce yourself, guest.
Hello, my name is Jackson Wheat. Nice to meet you.
All right. Well, as a first-time guest, I have a tradition where you get to pick at least one topic you want to talk about.
One topic I want to talk about. The weather's not very nice right now.
What means global warming is a lie, just kidding.
It shouldn't be this cold outside. It should be hot. Right. Well, I don't know what I run a YouTube channel where I talk about topics in biology and paleontology primarily. I also do occasional talks on other people's channels, mostly where they have me on to discuss issues in biology or paleontology. And those are my primary areas of interest. I don't really have any interest in politics or things like that. I find those much less interesting, even though everyone else seems to enjoy them.
Yeah, I don't like politics either, because back in the day, my family had this big falling out disagreement with politics, and this tore me off of them.
Exactly.
I mean, I still vote and stuff because it's what I do. It's American, but like I don't talk about it. Or like whatever.
Exactly right. Yeah, but I do love paleontology and biology. Pretty much the only books I read anymore are on those subjects. I just started reading a new book. The evolution of beauty? I think it's by Richard Prum. He does a lot of work on bird phylogenetics. He's actually got he did a paper, and there's this huge, beautiful chart on the phylogeny of birds. It's absolutely beautiful. When I was down at LSU Baton Rouge, they had it. The ornithologist or ornithology department had actually put it up on the wall, and so it's a beautiful chart. What about you? You enjoy reading much?
Yeah, I read a lot. Ever since I was 5 or 4 or 3, I don't know when I started reading, but yeah, I've always been interested in history. That was always my main thing. I like writing too. I want to write a book someday. But anyways, yeah, I was always interested in history, and what's kind of like, what's the word? I'll say colored, I guess, and I'll set my purpose, and stuff.
Okay.
Even when I was, quote, a creationist back in the day,
mm-hmm.
I think I was I consider myself an older Earth creationist, because my first book I remember reading was a book of prehistory. All those old Cambrian animals, and stuff, those trilobites and stuff, and those giant squids. I'm like, wow, these are cool. I'm like, wait, what? 6,000 years ago? Like, what? That doesn't sound right to me at all.
Right. Yeah, I've actually, speaking of prehistory, this is one I'm going to get to eventually. It's The End of the Megafauna by McPhee. Beautiful looking. And so it's going to have to go in my very tall list, though.
Yeah. Oh, Pokesaurus. He's the first guy. This is Jackson Wheat. He's like, I'll say it. You're not like a scientist, are you? Or historian?
I'm a student currently. I'm working on my bachelor's in biology. Then I have to go back for my master's and then my doctorate. All that fun stuff.
Dr. Jackson Wheat.
Yeah, that'll be weird to hear. But that is my goal. That's my hope. As of current, I'm just a student who makes YouTube videos. Not very prestigious, but
hey, we all make a living somehow.
Exactly. Well, my living is working at the store. I make very little money off of YouTube, but I enjoy it immensely. YouTube's very fun, and it pushes me to do a lot of research, and also I get to interact with a lot of very interesting people. And so that's why I do that, I think, in part. Really, I have a creationist to thank for my YouTube channel. I think, didn't Arn Ross say that too? I think like some creationist challenged him to do a set of arguments, and that's how he ended up with the foundational falsehoods of creationism, or something like that, I think.
Okay, I have that book on my and I have that book on my. I have the audiobook. Oh, Pokesora says you were afraid you were a creationist.
Me?
Yeah.
No, not. I was never a young Earth creationist. I was raised Christian. I'm not really I'm not a believer anymore. But I was never a creationist, really. But my maternal grandmother attempted to show me how strong the case for creationism was. She gave me a book by the Jehovah's Witness group Watchtower, even though she herself is not a witness, called "Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation?" which was authored in 1967. And I also have on my own bought all 4 of the Answers in Genesis Answers books, and I've been dissecting those with R.J. Downard. And we have been writing up rebuttals of them and things like that. And they're all in it. Our dissection of that is going to go into its own book titled "The Rocks Were There," which is
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I always want to do like a debunking video type thing, but I don't know if I have either the patience to get to sit through one of those books or videos, like to listen to them, like without going crazy, or like if I had the knowledge to actually, find where to actually like find the evidence, just saying no, that's wrong, you're stupid.
Oh, I think it's more the patience than the finding information. That's the hard part, I think, because it's really easy to find information that blows their entire argument out of the water. I mean,
Yeah.
most of the time they don't even reference actual scientific literature.
Oh yeah, the straw man thing.
Yeah.
Dogs don't come. Only a dog can produce a dog.
Right. And so it's really up to us to explain, well, we wouldn't expect that to happen, or we wouldn't expect a dog to produce a non-dog, for instance. It's like, yeah, we wouldn't expect that. And so that's precisely within evolution. So
that would be a miracle.
That would disprove evolution if that happened. Same with the crocoduck and things like that. You have to explain to them why these things that they're asking for, like a Pegasus or a crocoduck or what have you, would actually completely disprove evolution, not help it in any way, shape, or form.
I was thinking of something. I think the only of all the mystical animals, I think maybe a unicorn could be possible. Just like a horse gets some ivory or something on his nose or something, or his head, like an elephant or something, or a rhino.
Well, I mean, the one of the rhinoceroses is Diceras unicornis, I think.
I think that's probably like that. I heard that's where they got the name from.
Yeah.
But other than that, other animals are definitely not possible. Probably most likely.
Right. Well,
unless something weird like mutation happens.
Yeah. What's really interesting is that if you look at the Answers in Genesis literature, they have kind of gone in and sort of revised what ancient people thought were dragons and things like that. And they say, oh, no, these weren't dragons in the traditional sense. They were dinosaurs, right? Which it requires a whole lot of historical revisionism. And you have to kind of reinterpret these things in a modern context. You have to ignore their historical context, and so it's nonsense. It's a mess. And I looked at a little bit of it recently in a video I did. Not by a creationist, I think. At least I don't think the guy was a creationist. I think he was a conspiracy theorist, but he drew on a lot of creationist arguments.
Yeah, I used to have back in my church days, I had a subscription to Answers in Genesis. I think I really actually read it much. I think I got like the pretty pictures and stuff. Like, ooh, that's a pretty picture.
Yeah, they do have some nice pictures in there, but it's all totally bogus. And I occasionally follow their. I mean, I don't follow them on Twitter. I don't follow them, not subscribe to them or anything, but I do occasionally bump into their tweets and love. I'll look at them or at the article that they put up and then look through the technical literature. What does it actually say for this topic? And it's completely wrong.
Oh, yeah. During my last 2 years, my last 2 years before I quit going to church, we actually went to the Creation Museum twice, and during its opening days, first 2 opening years, we went. My church went there.
Mm-hmm.
It was like it was experience,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, they did all these little things. So it was. You ever been there before?
No, I probably should go one day. That's up in Kentucky, but no, I've not been over there.
It's about an hour from where I live.
Mhm.
Hour and a half from where I live right now.
Lucky you.
Yeah, but they at least back then. I don't know if they still have it now. I've been there in 10 years, give or take. But they had like a planetarium with you know they showed you, oh, this is how light gets here in only 6,000 whatever, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like the light here isn't like 2 billion miles away or whatever. It's only like blah blah blah.
Yeah, they have to entirely rework Einstein's theory of relativity. They have Jason Lisle, who has his own little postulate about how light moves. I think instantaneously is the idea. I'm not big into physics, but I do believe that's a summary of it. That's a very brief summary of it. Yeah, he just thinks light moves instantaneously, which, from what I understand, isn't technically wrong, but it doesn't fit with observations and experiments and things like that. So it's not very useful.
Yeah, and then the rest of it, then they go there, give you like little classroom setting, like, oh, if in your classroom, like, oh, dinosaurs are this, dinosaurs are that. Like, no, lady, you're wrong. Like, they found blood in it. This is back in 2008, so I don't know if they know, but they brought up that blood thing in the dinosaur bone thing.
Oh yeah, I've done a few videos where I bump into that topic. My first one was not succinctly titled "We All Have the Same Data in Genesis Paradise Lost," because my girlfriend Savannah and I had just recently been to the movie Genesis Paradise Lost, put out by Eric Hovind and Answers Genesis and all that. So we went and saw that movie in theaters. That was an experience, and so I
Yeah, I've
got
only seen
home.
the preview of it from the Apologia channel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he does a great. Paula G does a wonderful breakdown of their arguments. Um, and so, sounds like the dog is upstairs. And so I started working on a a script for a video where I break it down in their primary ideas or a few of their primary ideas and talk about what their main thrust is. One of the main thrusts is an idea that I now like titled the interpretations fallacy, which is basically we have the same facts, we just interpret them differently. Um, and so, yeah,
That thing. Like, oh, the Grand Canyon is the fact. How we interpret it. This is how the creationists interpret it. This is how the evolutionists interpret it.
right, exactly, yeah,
Of course, even though evolutionists didn't do the Grand Canyon.
yeah. They and so the blood argument, the soft tissue thing was one of the things I looked at originally, or I looked at in that, and I mentioned how they constantly bring up the soft tissue, but they don't point out A, that this stuff is microscopic, B, they don't point out all the research that shows it's almost identical to modern bird soft tissue. Like the osteocytes are almost identical to ostrich osteocytes, things like that. You never hear that. You would never hear that from creationists. They just don't bring that kind of stuff up because that'd be a little awkward. It's like, hey, look at this T-Rex soft tissue looks just like modern birds. Why is that? you know, uh, and so I actually brought it up again in I talked about it in a video about Mark Armitage, who was a creationist who found a Triceratops horn with soft tissue in it, and he published his results and became controversial. And then I did a recent video, which is my most recent video, where I look at this video by this guy named Beyond Science, whom I lovingly call BS. And he mentions it, and so I go through the whole. I actually look at the technical literature this time and go through the whole thing and say, hey, there are these preservatives, such as for one thing, it's collagen, which is pretty stable protein. There's hydroxyapatite, there's iron, there's calcite, which is further stabling the hydroxyapatite. There are all these different preservatives in there. All, not to mention, it's basically in a concrete tomb. You've got micrometers of soft tissue inside a little pocket of a gigantic bone that's not exposed to anything. And they're wondering why it got preserved for so long. You know, it's like it's not really a wonder. You know.
Yeah, sometimes I wish there actually was DNA in those things, so we could do the genetic testing. I was thinking, so we actually do that genetic testing to, see, oh yeah, that is the ancestor or directly related to thing. I mean, we had the fossils and stuff, the bone function, but the blood thing would be cool to just confirm it either way, especially with human ancestry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, about the only which amazingly there is recent research into DNA in fairly recently extinct organisms that's on the order of a few tens of thousands of years, and that's paleogenomics, which is a fascinating field. Again, completely ignored by creationists. There's information on like Neanderthals and Denisovans, who are both different species of humans, of very recent humans who went extinct recently. Paleogenomic research has even shown there was like another species of human which interbred with the Melanesians, but we don't really have any fossil evidence of it. It's like Denisovans are a few bones here and there. Of course, Neanderthals have lots of bones, but for this other Melanesian group, we just don't really know what it was, other than it was a human, some other species, and so that might be all we ever find of it,
Yeah.
And there are of course other there's other paleogenomic research on like ancient elephants and horses and glyptodonts, things like that, giant sloths, all fascinating research.
I think unless I'm mistaken, like it's been a few years old. I think the oldest thing that I know we had so far was a Neanderthal bone DNA from that. This has something older that I don't know about already.
I don't actually know which is the oldest. I'm not sure. I don't know which one is the oldest. They're all just a few tens of thousands of years old.
Let's prove that we had sex with them.
Yes, it did. There was wasn't there? I think there was a story that came out not too long ago that said, wasn't it like a human, a Denisovan, and a Neanderthal? It's like an individual with like DNA from all of them or something like that. It was, I can't quite remember it. I have to look it up, but it sounded interesting, and I don't quite remember it now. But yeah, we did. We interbred with them to some limited extent, or at least I think Europeans primarily did. And then Southeast Asians primarily interbred with the Denisovans. But yeah, there's also
a little joke here. So technically, Africans are the only pure humans around this game.
Yeah, that's what I think. Was it Secular Talk made that joke back when he made that joke a long time ago. But yeah, they're the only humans who've not like interbred. Well, as far as we know, we don't know if there are any other interbreeding events.
True.
The study's it's so recent, and there's only so much DNA that we have at present for ancient. Hold on a sec.
Oh.
Give me 1 second.
What was that?
Okay, but yeah, so it's such recent research, and I mean, there have already been a few really interesting areas of research, such as like I think mammoths, or one of my favorite, using mammoth and mastodon and gomphothere DNA to confirm that we can use using their hyoid bone to organize them in the elephantids was in fact correct, and so I think that was a very interesting area of research.
So are you watching the YouTube chat?
Am I?
Yeah.
No, I actually I don't have. I found your channel. It's Lamont Stewart, right?
Oh, Vendetta 98.
Which one?
Oh, I do Vendetta 98. Yeah, I have two channels. Technically, it's a thing. I started my little history back history. I started this channel in about 2007, but I didn't start making videos until 2009. But I started the channel. Then in 2011, I got my first smartphone. It was Android. I had to I had to get IDs to open up a Gmail. So like, okay, got my Gmail. And then a year later, they're like, YouTube is like, oh, you need to start using Gmail for YouTube. Like, okay,
Right. Yeah.
so okay, I have a Gmail. Oh, sorry, this one's already taken. Like, I know it's taken. It's I took it. It's mine. So I had to create another YouTube channel with my name, personal name, and then I transfer ownership of my original YouTube channel to my YouTube channel. I give myself ownership of it.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have two YouTube channels now. One I don't use at all, and two my main brand.
Right. Well, that's pretty funny. I really just started um my channel in late 2016. It was not long after I got to college because I met a creationist uh, who basically told me to go watch a series of videos on YouTube about creationism. Believe it or not, who would have guessed? and so I watched a few of them and did a response to a few of them, and the responses I did were not the best. I didn't have my headset back then, for instance, and I really didn't know much of what I was doing. I now have a crack team of editors who help me with my scripts. Plus I've got this very wonderful headset. So now things are getting better. So
Yeah, I need some editors for my script. I need editors. Oh, like
yeah,
I just recently learned how to use Premiere Pro to edit videos.
Yeah.
So I'm getting into the modern technology now.
Yeah, exactly. That's same as me. I'm not a tech person at all. The fact that I can do any of this is nearly miraculous in and of itself. And so, I just don't know my way around technology. I don't do animations or anything like that. And so, it is what it is, I guess. But
oh yeah, back to the Creation Museum real fast. After that, they basically you'd go on a tour of the Bible. You go, oh, this is the animals and stuff, and there's naked Adam and Eve. Not naked, they're hidden. But then they go darkness and then the corruption and stuff, and then they run away, the murder stuff, and then basically all the way up to the flood, and then after then the Tower of Babel stuff, and then they skip all the way from that to the New Testament with Jesus dying, and then the museum over with. So they go all the way from the beginning to Tower of Babel, skip to Jesus, then gift shop.
All the rest is too boring. No one cares about Solomon or David or any of those other guys running around killing people. It's all very boring. Or heck, Babel is still just Genesis. I didn't even touch Exodus.
They stopped before Abraham.
Really?
Yeah, like
wow.
They gotta explain. Oh, this is how sin get into the world. This is how everyone's dead now. Everyone has a bottleneck now, and this is how we have different languages. Okay, that's all we need to know. Bye. Oh yeah, get saved now.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like the movie Genesis Paradise Lost. They just made the museum into a movie and then put it out there for all the rest of us to see. But yeah, it was I've not been there. I actually occasionally get commercials for the Ark Encounter on my videos. Same with PragerU, but I'm always perversely amused when I see them. The only thing I do think about it is that I'm getting ad revenue from them, so that's what matters. That's the only thing I really care about. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of have I have a sort of interest. My girlfriend and I have talked about going there, but I just haven't. That would be a lot of gas money, trying to get there. I really don't even know how far it is from here. I'm in Shreveport, so
Where's that at?
northwest Louisiana.
Oh, Louisiana, like 2 states away.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a ways from there. I've only
Yeah.
really been that close like once, so. But I don't know. It might be interesting. I remember, like, Bill Nye went there, Aaron Raw, they've all done their little protests out front. That'd probably be fun to do. Go to the protest, talk with people and stuff like that. I haven't seen any. When I was down at LSU, there was a group of religious fundamentalists from Mississippi, and they would come down and preach at the students and whatnot. I haven't seen them recently since I came back to Shreveport, and so I miss them sometimes. I don't get to see creationists in person anymore. I just get to interact with them over the internet, which isn't as great,
Yeah, I just got back into science recently with all these science channels and debunking channels. And when I was little, besides history, I was a little into science. I was more into like nature stuff, like environmental and food chains. I loved food chains as a kid, like the whole what eats what thing, like the whole trying to find the whole like the longest food chain ever.
I did a video where I talked about food chains and food webs and all that. That was a Predators, Prey, and Parasites was the name of it. It was part of my How Evolution Works series.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah, I did a series where I talk about, as the name implies, how evolution works, and so part of it was the selective pressures on organisms in response to predators or prey in their environment, things like that. And so, and so it's a really amazing area of research. Ecology is something I might talk about more in the future. I did talk a little bit about it in that same series. I did another video on how biomes change and things like that, and you can actually track that over Earth's history. And there's some really interesting stuff. You can see how the biogeography changes. Like you've got your continent, which crashes into this other one. How are animals being distributed? How are animals and plants being distributed? It moves away.
Like speciation events, like the continents drifting apart.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Or like the mountains coming up when they come back together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Precisely. Yeah, and I think all that stuff is very interesting. And there are a lot of different researchers who've written about that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of technical research on it.
Yeah, I was wondering this back when we were still all sea creatures, how they did species, how that happened, how the animals were separated during when we were all watery and stuff.
Well, there's a lot of ocean to swim around in.
Sure, they just go far enough and they don't come back.
Or some organisms might undergo niche partitioning, where for instance, if you're this population, or you're a few populations like near the coast, some of you might specialize towards being near the water's edge. Others might specialize towards being a little bit towards the deeper water, things like that. So you get different food sources and you don't bump into each other as much. And that's part of it. Or I think, well, now there's research, because it used to be thought that the fish moved out of land or moved out of the water and then developed their like load-bearing limbs or whatever.
Now the opposite way around.
Right. Yeah. They had their limbs and then they came out of the water. And so
I was watching that. I've been watching that Aaron Raw's cladogram series that he's kind of put on hold right now for his Kent Hovind debate thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I had no idea there were that many different steps and clades from.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely massive. One zoom is neat for living organisms. It doesn't give you a breadth of the diversity of fossils, which I think a good phylogenetic website really needs to give you a breadth of not just the living organisms, which are easy to put on a cladogram for the most part. You need to see how they link up with extinct organisms, who fits where. And when you see that, when you combine, fossils and paleogenomic data with your modern organisms, then you see this. It gets much bigger, and a lot more of the the gaps get filled in, and it makes it easier to visualize the evolution.
Yeah, I think the three main gaps we know about right now that I want to learn about. Two of them I already learned about is one between the lobe fins and the tetrapods, the gap there. Then between the amniotes and the mammals, that big gap there. And now between the hominids and then the humans, where that big gap there. So coming up, I'm interested in too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are what we are. Our ancestry. Two things I've been speaking of that. There's a thing I've been researching lately. I don't know if it's still a hypothesis or whatever. Is that there's not three domains. There might be only two domains, bacteria and archaea, and we might be an archaea technically in that family tree.
Yeah, that is. I think that's. Well, so you had what is his name? Woes, however you pronounce it. It's like Woese was the proponent of the three domains idea, which is where you had bacteria and then you had eukarya and archaea sister to each other. But then you get I think James Lake and his colleagues who propose that eukaryotes aren't just sister to archaeans; they are archaeans. They're highly derived archaeans. And so I think that's pretty much gained ascendancy in microbiology. I do believe that is now the general consensus. You've got your archaean, which enveloped bacteria, which became mitochondria, and your archaean developed a nucleus, and so then that became the eukaryote, the first eukaryote.
And then and one of them said, "I'm tired of eating food now. I'll make my own food. Here, I'll capture a cyanobacteria. Does it work for me?"
Yeah, I think that you got the endosymbiosis. So he's just going along trying to eat little guys, and then he happens to form a relationship with this one. And there's been a whole lot of research on this group called Loki Archaeota, which are these archaeans over between like Greenland and Iceland, or it's way up there it's way up in like northern Europe, Arctic Sea, that area, and Arctic Ocean, whatever it is. and there are these archaeans who have these genes that align them closer to eukaryotes than any other archaeans. And there's been similar research because there are these two groups called DPAN and TAC. Those are both acronyms. I don't remember the whole name for them, but both of these were considered under Woe's idea to be within archaea, but under Lake's idea, they are actually more closely related to DPAN, TAC, and Loki Archaeota are all more closely related to eukaryotes than they are to the other archaeans, which are in this clade called Euryarchaeota. And so it's all very fascinating research.
Yeah. So not only are eukaryotes, we're also archaeans, and maybe even specific branches of archaeans.
Yeah, that's what it seems at current. And so it's all very fascinating research. One book that I think is really good describing it is The Vital Question by this guy named Nick Lane. He talks about abiogenesis, which is a fascinating topic. The endosymbiotic event. He talks about lots of things.
Oh yeah, if RNA came first and came DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
weird. I think there's only one. Like when you see the RNA strands and DNA strands, is like only three of the letters match up, but only one letter's difference. Like I forget what letter that is.
It's uracil and thymine. Yeah.
Yeah. So like maybe that's what happened. The mutation happened, turned that into that, and that's how it became DNA.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's there's a whole lot of questions there as to how any of that occurred. I really don't research a lot in abiogenesis because a lot of it is very, very technical, biochemistry and physics and things like that. And so I really kind of avoid that area for the most part. But
yeah, I just like learning things in general, like knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of my catchphrases here.
Yeah, it's a good phrase. But it was a whole lot of super technical stuff, even for me. And so I was like, and so I really avoided it for the most part. But I did get this book because this book talked about it, and it beautiful. The way he describes it is absolutely beautiful, and it even made my eyes a little watery uh, reading about his description of it because I didn't know there was so much research in this area, and I've looked into a bit more of it now. But it's just fascinating. The whole uh, idea that life began in alkaline hydrothermal vents. There's all this research into these. The ocean was, partly acidic due to the dissolving of carbon dioxide in the ocean to make carbonic acid, and then you get the you have iron sulfides in the side of the vent, which catalyze reactions between the carbon dioxide has been dissolved in the ocean, as well as hydroxides produced by the alkaline vents. It's all very fascinating research.
You ever like any like you like like think about stuff out there in the you're thinking sometimes I look at the stars. I'm thinking, I wonder how many stars are actually dead now that we see in the sky. We just don't know about it because it takes forever
Yeah,
for light to get here.
yeah, that's very yeah, that is something to think about. I don't know, but maybe a lot of them. When we wish on stars, are they dead just like our dreams? Who knows? But yeah, it's all very interesting. I'm not hugely. I haven't really read much of anything as far as astronomy. Well, at least not recently. I've read a few books on astronomy, but a long time ago. Like the A Brief History of Time. I read that a number of years ago. Neil deGrasse Tyson's book Origins, and I read A Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss. All interesting. I thought they were all pretty interesting, but astronomy's not really my thing. But that's just me.
Yeah, I'm more of a general so I'm focused on I mean like history, but I'm more of a everything like generalist, I guess, whatever the word is. Dabble in everything.
Right. You mentioned at the very beginning that you appreciated the Cambrian explosion.
That's the first book I remember reading was I was in the library, and it's like this. Oh, but it's this book, and I saw all these cool old animals back when I was like 5 or elementary school age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually have 2 videos on the Cambrian explosion.
The explosion that took like 20 million, like a few million years.
Yeah, yeah. Explosion has really been abused by the creationist and intelligent design crowd.
Kind of like the Big Bang.
Right. That's another wonderful example. If it was an explosion, how did it create anything? Well, it wasn't.
Rename it the Big Expansion, or however it's called.
Yeah, sounds less appealing though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I made a joke in one of some of those videos, like maybe if we change cladistics to kindistics, the creationists will get it.
Possibly, they'll be looking for spots to chop all the lines, though, and and that'd be unfortunate. But yeah, it's in my video on the Cambrian, or my videos on the Cambrian explosion. The first one explains the Precambrian side of it. So, what were the factors that came together to catalyze the explosion itself? And then the second video is, well, what organisms came out of it, what groups, things like that. And there's so much research that gets ignored by creationists, intelligent designers. I read Donald Prothero's book, Evolution: What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. And one of the things he mentions is how intelligent designer Stephen Meyer ignores the small shelly fauna. There, for anyone wondering, the small shelly fauna, it's this. It's not a scientific name. It's just it's a little name that they give to the remains of all these organisms, like little echinoderms, like starfish and their relatives, or not really crustaceans, basal arthropod, things like that. All these little guys, we find these little remains of them right around when the Precambrian becomes the Cambrian, and they're just ignored by creationists.
Oh, Yeah, it's weird. I used to think I thought I was a intelligent designer for a while, but I wasn't because I thought it meant back in the days. I thought it meant something totally different. I thought intelligent designer was the same as like theistic evolution. Like,
Hmm.
oh, that sounds cool. That makes sense to me. Back when I was still a churchgoer, and like, but like then I designed, oh, that's the same as your. And they're like, no, that's the same thing as creation. Like what? Really?
Sort of. It depends on who your intelligent designer is. Jonathan Wells, for instance, is much more closer to a creationist than Michael Behe is. Michael Behe would say, yeah, the human species is, 200,000 or 300,000 years old. The genus Homo has been around for millions of years. The planet is billions of years old, etc. He only invokes intelligent design, really, as far as I understand it, to explain things at the molecular level. His favorite example, the most infamous of them, is the bacterial flagellum. You know, okay, bacteria, how they evolved over billions of years, that's all fine and good. But the flagellum itself, he says evolution can't really explain at the molecular level how this would have come about. And I actually did a whole video on that. And other people have done whole videos on it because there's a wealth of literature out there, again, that gets ignored by intelligent designers and creationists who try to make these arguments. But there's really fascinating research on it. And we know it was a type 3 secretory system, and it took on this new function, which was further modified and modified and modified again, and then it's eventually became what we recognize as a flagellum today.
Ah.
It's really neat stuff. I think that one was in response to another creationist I'd met. I didn't just come up with. It wasn't when I just thought, "Hey, I need to debunk that argument," but I talked to a creationist a little bit before then, and he kind of challenged me to do that. So
speaking of creationists, you went head to head with Kent Hovind.
yes, I did. I actually first spoke to him back in summer of 2017, so over a year ago now. And when I talked to him then, I just called him because I was talking to my friend Peter, who's from Holland, and he mentioned to me that Hovind had like a phone number and he would answer and all this other stuff. And so I decided to call him and talk to him. And we talked for about an hour and a half, I think, something like that. And he uploaded all 3 parts to his channel, and then I mirrored them on my channel. And so that was when I first spoke to him. And I don't think I did very well in that one. And I'm happy to say that because I think I didn't really cut through the crap as well as I could have. I think that there are better examples I could have used, things like that. And I just really overall think I didn't do very well in that discussion. But I met this guy named Modern Day Hysteria who asked me to do a debate with Hovind on whether or not the flood happened. And didn't really want to do it at first, but I agreed to it. And I think in part I did it because I saw my friend RJ kick Hovind's butt in a different debate. And so I agreed to it and decided to go with it. And I did it. I wrote up a script, which I could read. I counted all of his points, and not only there in the video, but also I did my own video afterwards, or I buried them again. And it was a great time. I enjoyed it immensely. And I would definitely do it again.
I actually used to be a flood believer back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But even I was one of those people like, oh, the Bible, it must be true. But then I'm thinking, my history part of me is thinking, but wait a minute here. How can the flood happen 4,000 years ago if the Native Americans and the Indians crossed over the land bridge 10,000 years ago? I'm like, huh. My thinking, huh. Bible said the flood happened, but they're over here 10,000 years ago, which means obviously the flood happened like 40,000 years ago. Like, duh. Like I'm a genius. Like that's what happened. But then later I found out it never happened at all. Like, but still trying to justify it in my head. I'm like, does that make sense?
Yeah, Genesis is very intriguing ways of trying to explain how the flood happened, but also explaining literally all the cultures around Earth who were already doing their own thing and didn't happen to notice a flood at all when it happened. They all just
how the animals got over everywhere really fast, and how the humans got to America or Australia really fast.
Exactly. Yeah, biogeography is ignored. As for instance, the marsupials, how they got to Australia, Andrew Schlafly, he runs Conservapedia. He posited volcanoes basically blew koalas and other marsupials to Australia.
I made a joke. The kangaroos put everybody in their pouches. The kangaroos put all the animals in their pouches and took them all in a few trips.
Exactly. I would love to have seen like projectile koalas and kangaroos, wouldn't you?
but then one marsupial missed its mark and landed in South America.
Exactly. Yeah, how did that happen? It's completely laughable, and they really don't pay any attention to biogeography, but I think it's really more fun to look at it from a historical perspective. Sargon of Akkad, I believe, was unifying Mesopotamia at the time the flood was happening, allegedly. There was this whole transition of power. There were all these political things going on over in Mesopotamia. The Egyptians were working or about to start work on the sixth dynasty's pyramids. Somehow they had enough people, just 30 years after the flood, to construct a set of pyramids.
They were that damn good.
They were that good. They were fast, like exponential rabbits, I guess. Native Americans were somehow, after the flood, like, I guess Noah told one of his sons, "Go that way, take your wife, go that way, breed as fast as you can. The rest of us are going to Egypt to build the pyramids." Potholer 54 did a really good video on it back in the day.
Oh yeah, I remember that, where it's like
yeah.
If you want to find out how we get 7 billion humans now, go to this article. You want to find out how they can build the pyramids, go to this article. Don't read both articles, then you just get confused.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a wonderful video. I love it so much. Yeah, that one's just so great. And he's right. He's absolutely right, because you have all these cultures who, while they may have flood myths, a lot of cultures absolutely do have flood myths and legends. That's fine. They're not at the same time. They're not all saying we all have a flood legend and it occurred. The flood occurred 4,000 years ago. They're not all saying that. That's a few of them. That's a few Middle Eastern ones.
Yeah, I see about that. I remember back when I used to watch the History Channel, back when it was still the History Channel.
Right.
Don't get me into that now. So it was like the reality show channel. But
right.
I read this article where this episode where they're talking about the flood, local flood, where maybe a few thousand years ago or something like that, there was like an asteroid or something hit around the Mediterranean or Black Sea, and that might have caused a flood back in that.
I've heard that one, yeah.
I don't know if that's still that was scientifically proven or not, but I was like,
no.
That's interesting.
No way. I don't think anyone seriously or I don't think anyone in history really thinks that was it. I don't know. I mean, that just to invoke a meteor as the explanation. I mean, I guess theoretically possible, but
but that's more of for like localist flood, right? Not like that worldwide flood, I think.
Right. But I mean,
yeah.
At the same time, I don't know. I don't think they have any geologic evidence in support of that thus far. But I think the flood itself in the Middle East, the Utnapishtim story, Noah, and the other Middle Eastern flood stories all came from a single event, which was, what was his name? It was a guy earlier than both of them who survived, or who's one of the flood legend heroes, survived a flood. Of course, where they lived was the Iraqi floodplain.
Gilgamesh? Is that something different?
No, Gilgamesh was the one who met. He met Utnapishtim, and Utnapishtim recounted the whole story to him. But it was a different one. I can't. The guy's name, I think it started with the Z. I can't remember his name. But anyways, so there's geologic evidence of a flood that actually happened about the same time this guy lived. This guy supposedly lived. And so it's like, this flood, this layer corresponds to a flood at the same time that this guy was living. So maybe this guy had some aggrandized story of this flood, which was then passed on to these other places, which also aggrandized the story, and that's how it happened in the
Like
Middle
the game,
East.
like the telephone game, like back
Precisely.
when it was oral, when it was still oral history, they written stuff down like, oh, and then oh, you ever read that book, Dr. Seuss book? And I think I saw on Mulberry Street.
I don't think so.
That's what basically it is. He says his kid saw a horse in a cart. Like, no, it was a horse in a chariot. No, it was a zebra in a chariot. No, it was a whole circus.
Right. Yeah, that's a pretty good representation of probably what happened. Is a single guy say like on a boat with his family and dog or something? No, it was the whole farm. No, it was in the whole city, all the animals on Earth. That and not all. And creationists try using that sort of argument with they say, oh, look at all the cultures have this flood legend. Yeah, they're nothing alike. Some people escaped the flood in a gourd, or they were told by a fish or a goat, or they escaped on like a raft or something, or the whole world, the whole population of the earth was destroyed, and the gods made more people to put on the earth. The stories are completely different, and then they want to go, well, here are some details that are kind of similar in these stories, in some of the stories, and there's the evidence that it was a global flood, just like the Bible says. It's like, no. Or the fact that not all cultures actually have a native global flood legend. Like I think the Celtics don't have one. The Han dynasty didn't have one, and a few others. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
facts.
and some
Who needs these?
Of course, I have somebody have floods. They live around. Most people live around water. But so when you were debating Kent Hovind, did he use his catchphrases a lot?
My sound keeps kind of breaking up.
I said when you were debating Kent Hovind, did he use his catchphrases?
Well, he's got a limited set of phrases and words that he says, and he said a few of them. He mostly just hawked his book or his videos, really.
Like, of course you're wrong, because my book's only for $9.95 says you're wrong.
Right, exactly. That's really what he did most of the time. He didn't really rebut most of what I said, and when he did make arguments, I went after all of them, because I had my little script, which I read, which took about 5 minutes, and then I was second, so I went through and rebutted each of the things he had said when he wasn't hawking his wares.
Oh, because you rebut what he says, basically because he says the same thing all the time.
In part, yeah. I brought up a few things he had said because I watched a video in preparation for the debate that he did back in 2014. One of the claims he made was that mammoths weren't polar creatures. That mammoths are actually tropical animals.
Because that hair is very helpful in the tropics.
Well, he had one line of evidence for it, even though I came and said, "Hey, actually, they have the remains of polar plants in their dung, for one thing. There's there are all sorts of markers that they were polar creatures. It's not just that they have fur; it's that they have such a thick amount of fur, and they have all this fat on them also, and they're in the same environment with other animals that are heavily covered with fur and whatnot." But he said his only argument was, well, they don't have sebaceous glands to keep their hair from sticking or whatever, or matting, whatever it was. And I was like, and I thought, interesting. So I went online, took about 10 seconds, found a paper saying with pictures that mammoths did indeed have sebaceous glands. And I read the abstract of it during the debate. Nothing in that debate made me so happy as having him on record saying mammoths didn't have sebaceous glands, and me taking 10 seconds to find evidence that they did. Nothing else gave me that amount of joy.
Of course, you do it again and be like, I never said that.
Yeah, the best part is we have you on record. And so I smashed that idea again when I did my video about it. I did my video afterwards about it, kind of reviewing what I said and that sort of thing. And so I just enjoyed that so much. Getting to stomp that idea, live was wonderful. Unfortunately, though, I read a few of the comment section, or I read a few of the comments on the original video, which was on Modern Day Hysteria's channel. I mirrored the video online with his permission, and a lot of them were saying, a lot of the creationists were like, or who I could tell were creationists, they were saying, "Oh, good job, Kent. These evolutionists will never listen." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Did you see what I pointed out?"
I was thinking of that. You can, if you want to, you can mirror this video on your channel if you want to.
Oh, thank you. I was flabbergasted because I made all these points. He rebutted not one of them. The things he did attempt to rebut, I destroyed him on, and yet nothing. And they're never going to admit that he's wrong, ever. They never have. And the best I can do, because I'm never going to convince him, right? You don't go into a debate with the belief that you're going to convert your opponent or deconvert or whatever. I'm talking out there for the people who are coming in. They're on the fence. They don't really know. Is evolution true? Was there a flood? Was there not? And I want them to see this and realize, oh, hey, this guy Hovind has no idea what the heck he's talking about.
Oh, back in season 3 of my podcast, when it was more science focused, me and my friends, X-Bite Spider and Brett, were like, we were discussing, like, who's the dumbest creationist, like in gold, medal, silver, bronze? Kent Hovind, Ken Ham, or Ray Comfort? Like, which one's like?
I'd have to say Ray Comfort. I think they're all three different, and I'll explain why. I think Ken Ham darn well knows what he's saying about creationism is wrong. I think he knows, and I think he makes enough money off. I think either he makes enough money off of it to justify the belief to himself, or, and that's me being very cynical, and I'm not usually that cynical, or I think, and this is the idea, another idea I've heard from other people, and I think this is probably more likely, is that he believes in the Bible. He does recognize evolution is true, but he thinks that you need Jesus. Everyone needs salvation. But evolution, he thinks, teaches that the Bible is wrong and all this other stuff. So either we can show, we can keep evolution and people might think the Bible is wrong, or we get rid of evolution and try to convince people that the Bible is right and they get salvation and all that. I think that's what he is doing. I think he knows that evolution is right, and I know a few of his people on his team know that evolution is right because they've said so, like Todd Wood and Kurt Wise. But I think that they realize salvation is more important, and so they're like, we're going to try to get people salvation. And Todd Wood has said as much. Ray Comfort, on the other hand, is just an idiot. I don't believe that man will ever realize that he has no idea what he's ever talking about. Kent Hovind, I have a difficult time thinking about Kent Hovind because I don't know. I don't think he's the same way as Ken Ham. I don't think he is just in it for the salvation. I don't think he's in it for just the money, even though I know a lot of people do. I don't really know what goes on in his head. I think Georgia Purdom is kind of similar to me. I don't know what goes on in her head. She's a PhD geneticist, but she works for Answers in Genesis. What is she thinking?
Who?
Georgia Purdom.
Oh, is that the girl that's on that show all the time? That apology.
Yeah, Ham and Eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's her. I would love to know. I just love to have her like a one-on-one, like maybe not even on YouTube, just privately. Like, what do you think about these things? What goes through your mind? I would love for that chance, but I'll never get it. I think Bodie Hodge is the same as Ray Comfort. I think Bodie Hodge is just a useful idiot, nothing more.
Is he the one that's Kent's son-in-law?
Yes. Yeah, that's Bodie. Yeah, I think Ray Comfort's a useful idiot. Probably Bodie Hodge too. Georgia Purdom and Kent Hovind are mysteries, but in different ways. They're mysteries to me.
Well, one of them is actually a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. and I've read her work. I've read several different papers that she has written.
Does
And
he
it's
actually
just,
have peer-reviewed papers out there?
oh, yes, in cancer research, I think I haven't read those. They're probably just, not very, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think they're probably very interesting. They're probably very useful and whatnot. They're very legitimate and technical, but I don't really read cancer research.
Yeah.
So she does have real technical work out there. What I'm talking about is I've read her chapters in the Answers books. I've read articles she's written in Answers Genesis, as well as their own semi-technical papers. She wrote one with a bunch of people on how to determine what kinds were on the ark. It was pitiful, just abysmal.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. I was like, how like they don't believe in evolution, but they do believe in speciation. That's not evolution. That's something totally different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they have to redefine evolution such that it can't include speciation or things like that. Even though that genetic change at or above the level of species is literally the definition of macroevolution, which they can't have. Even though they allow speciation, but they don't explain where they stop, and they try a number of different methods. Like they say, oh, it's hybridization, except not all canids can interbreed. And it's like, it's not that then all the time, because sheep and
do you think like dogs and wolves can interbreed since they're still the same thing, or you think they have drifted far enough apart from that?
Dogs and gray wolves can interbreed. They can also do that with coyotes, dingoes, dogs, gray wolves, dingoes, dogs, wolves, coyotes, and one of the jackals. I can't remember which one it is, but they can all interbreed.
And I mean, but can they make what's not the word?
They can make fertile hybrids.
Okay, because it's like I was like when I was looking that when I was looking at the liggers and whatever the other side is, the Tygon. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. But cool. Then I found out that they're like way apart on the branches. I'm like, I wonder if they even tried the closer matches, because
what's interesting is that not all members of Canidae can interbreed. Like house dogs can't interbreed with South American canids, like the maned wolf, for instance, which is Chrysacion or something like that. Chrysacion. Can't interbreed with the maned wolf. Can't interbreed with bat-eared foxes or true foxes. So not all members of Canidae, the dog family, can interbreed, and creationists are okay with that. They'll even go so far as say, even if they can't hybridize, they can still be the same kind. Their kindology, baromenology.
But I thought if they could bring forth, they're the same kind. But they can't bring forth, can they?
Yeah, I mean, they can bring forth or not bring forth. Either way, they're still a kind. And it's with that one concession, their idea is dead. Baromenology is dead with that, because suddenly, elephants and humans who can't bring forth can still be the same kind.
The elephant and pine tree argument.
Exactly. And since they can't bring forth after their kind or anymore, they're still the same kind. It doesn't matter. And so they'll allow any concession essentially, as long as it sort of looks like these animals should be related to each other. That's what they call cognitum. Basically, they say eyeball it, which is why they say the order. Is it the order? The order of pigs, I think, which is pigs and peccaries, which is Suoidea, I think. They're allowed to be all related to each other, but two subfamilies, the subfamily of cattle and the subfamily of goats, are not related to each other. So you got the order up here and the subfamilies down here. These guys are all related to each other. These guys aren't.
I think the only thing that legal at the species level is us.
Yeah, well, I think they say red pandas also, but they don't really care about fossil data, and I don't know what the fossil data is for red pandas.
Fossils don't count because they can't tell us anything.
Yeah, the fossils don't breed. You know what's interesting is we actually have fossils of organisms who died in birth. and giving birth. Like there's some ichthyosaurs who died while giving birth. You know, what about fossil eggs? Did something not lay those eggs? You know, uh, same with you know, juveniles. Well, I guess kind of the same with juveniles, although maybe not. But uh, I don't know. I've made a whole series now on which is taking apart Kent Hovind's. Well, that's one of Kent Hovind's little phrases. Is all a fossil tells you is something died. You've heard that one?
Like several times. I've
Yeah.
heard it. I heard it in Aaron Ross debate. I've heard it in Logic's debunk videos.
Mm-hmm.
It's like like again, he's just the same catchphrases most of the time.
Yeah, I've devoted a whole series now, which is titled Paleontology, to explaining why that's just fractally inaccurate. There are multiple whole fields determined just to explaining organism, just fossils, you know, like taphonomy. Taphonomy is the study of how organisms die and get preserved. There's a whole field on that. It's fascinating research. You could look at, you know, the strata that the fossils are in. You can compare fossils of these different organisms, see what kind of environment it was. Was it, you know, a coastal environment? Was it a desert? What kind of environment was it? And there's all this data on it. And for someone like Kent Hovind to even say that means he's just not even trying, really. You know?
Yeah. Speaking of not trying, I remember something I used to think. You know, back in that Jurassic Park movie in the '90s, the original Jurassic Park movie, where they like got the DNA from a thing, and then they then I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized this thinking about this later. You know, they're like, we took DNA from a frog to fill in the gaps. I'm like, they're thinking, when did you use a bird? Why a frog?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Why not a bird? Well, although, you know, they didn't accurately represent the dinosaurs. They did use like Velociraptor. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Can't a little cute little tiny one. You gotta have a big vicious one.
yeah, no one's gonna be afraid of like a turkey-sized raptor. You know, it's got to be a big man-sized creature.
Well, then again, in the second movie, they did have those little tiny ones attacking that little girl. Like,
Oh yeah,
50 of them.
Compsognathus. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's more accurate, but I think they in the book they gave those like a venom. They were, oh yeah, they were. You know, they bit you and they had little venom glands or whatever. And I think some dinosaurs have been alleged to have had venom glands, although I don't think that's been shown conclusively at any point recently. So I don't think so. It'd be interesting though. You know, could you imagine if some dinosaurs were venomous? That'd be pretty neat.
Oh, speaking of dinosaurs, did you hear about the where they talk about how the classifications might be wrong that we had for all these years? That theropods might be on the other side of the branch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what they're arguing about is these very deep splits. That's Baron et al.'s paper, and he's kind of been having a back and forth with or is it Nesbitt? I think. I can't remember.
Some student like thinking like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Baron et al. So Baron et al. Wrote this paper where he's like, hey, what if, or you know, proposing that hey maybe theropods are actually aligned with ornithischians instead of with sauropods. Sauropods is their own branch, and so really none of or let me rephrase that. Most of the branches on the tree really didn't get rearranged at all. Most of the clades, like, you know, stegosaurs and kylosaurs, ceratopsians, they're all still ornithischians. Tyrannosaur, ornithomimids, they're still theropods, etc. Most of the branches didn't get rearranged. Mostly it's just the little bottom branches. The branches at the very bottom, which happens in the mammal trees, and in the mammal tree, and that happens a lot in these very, very deep branches where it's hard to figure out who's related to who. And if it's right, then you know it's right, and that's fine. I'm happy with us getting closer to the truth.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things they did change was this group called Herrerasaurids, who were considered to be theropods for a long time. actually might be related. They might be sister to the sauropods, and the prosauropods, which is really interesting. I think that's really neat because that means they're the this carnivorous ancestor of the big plant eaters instead of an herbivorous ancestor. So
Yeah, it's another thing I like about sometimes the stuff you think is like, oh, we were wrong this whole time, like the Pluto thing. Like I grew up saying Pluto was a planet, all of a sudden, nope, not a planet anymore.
yeah, that's do you watch Rick and Morty?
I've seen a few clips of them. I haven't really.
They had there's an episode where the dad goes with Rick and Morty to Pluto, and he tells all the people who live on Pluto, like, Pluto is a planet, and they're all like, yay! instead of a moon or a dwarf planet. And so I thought that reminded me of that. But yeah, research gets overturned all the time. It happens. We still haven't. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's like also not this research that you have to turn. It's like it takes forever to get to the general public too. It's like when I was in the 80s, when they're talking about the trees of life, but how these are the five kingdoms: bacteria, monotheria, protist, fungus, animals, and plants. And then I found out later on, that stuff was rearranged in the 70s. Like, but so that the time I got to school, they didn't update our books yet. And also
Right.
the five vertebrates, the fish, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, birds. And now I realize, birds and reptiles are the same thing, and there's no fish.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Because I was in elementary school in the early 2000s, and I was also taught the five kingdoms. And so that tells you it's still, in there. They're still wrong about it. At least in the elementary level. When I got into middle school, it was we learned the correct one. But yeah, it takes them forever. And maybe part of it is that the elementary school teachers aren't introduced to the new research, and maybe they feel that it's not necessary because these are such young kids. I don't know. I have no idea, but you're right. It was debunked a long time ago, and it's still being. This is still out there, and it's just bogus. Fungi are more closely related to animals than they are to plants, and that's kind of bizarre,
like and how tuna are more related to us than they are the sharks.
Right, yeah, exactly. And sharks more closely related to us than they are to hagfish. Things like that. There's fish is paraphyletic. They're actually fish more closely related to us than to other fish, like lungfish and coelacanths. They're more closely related to us than they are to goldfish. And so, there are fish on both sides of the split, and it's a paraphyletic group, and so it's not a natural grouping anymore, and so there are no fish.
Yeah, like reptiles and maybe monkeys. I'm not sure.
Monkeys, yeah, that's another one that's paraphyletic. Yeah,
it can be a little both, really, because if you go deep enough, everybody's a monkey, but then there's different branches.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's Simiiformes, isn't it? I think
I think that's the branch between New World, Old World, and apes. That's like
right.
They all meet together.
Yeah, and so the Old World monkeys are cercopithecoids, and the New World monkeys are platyrrhines. And so, yeah, you're right. It changes. I was really interested in because there are 4 superorders of mammals. There's Yorgontoglira, which contains primates and rodents. There's Laurasiatheria, which is a whole lot of different mammals. Xenarthra, which is armadillos, anteaters, and sloths. And Afrotheria, which is elephants and aardvarks and a few other African mammals. And turns out that Afrotheria and Xenarthra are together. They're sister to each other. And then Laurasiatheres and Yorgontoglira are sister to each other. And I thought that was pretty neat because when I read the first version of the Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins.
I read both versions of it. I think do they like? I think they rearranged two
Yeah.
clades around, and that's like the
Yep.
new version of it.
He did.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was disappointed with the I had the book, and but I was disappointed with the audio version of it because it's abridged. I don't, and they kind of lost it on the abridged version of it.
Oh man, I can't imagine reading 700 pages of book. No. That's so much.
I love time. Back in the day, I lived in a different city, but I still worked here, so I take the bus every day. I 2 hours on the bus, so like I had 4 hours to read a book. So I read a lot of books.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I usually read before class starts. But yeah, I read it or I read the original version a few years ago, and then I read the original one like 4 years ago, and the new one like 2 years ago, I think. Wonderful book, one of my favorite books of all time. I love it so much. That was the book that I think really helped solidify in my mind a lot of the different relationships of organisms. And then after I met RJ, and he taught me about source methods approach, which is where you go to the scientific research and actually read that instead of someone's summary of it. I started reading a lot of that for myself, and a lot of it became more solidified in my mind, which really helped me understand all of it. And I have Dawkins really to thank for all of that at the base of it. So he might not be looked too fondly upon by most, skeptics nowadays, but I'll always have a soft spot for him because he helped me with that. So
yeah, I also read his the Selfish Gene book and another book.
that's a good one.
Let me rephrase that. I didn't read it. I audiobooked it. My Audible.
That's okay. It's still a good book,
And then,
I enjoyed that one. It's kind of dry though.
What's the name? I looked this up real fast. Check my thing fast.
So yeah, I've read The Ancestor's Tale, Selfish Gene, Greatest Show on Earth.
That was the one. That was the one. Greatest Show on Earth.
Oh yeah, that one's really good. The first one I read of his though was The Blind Watchmaker, and
I haven't checked that one out yet.
That one's a bit dry, but if you think The Selfish Gene's dry, Blind Watchmaker is pretty dry. And then, well, of course, I've read the only non-biology book of his that I've read is The God Delusion. I read that one a number of years back. I really don't remember much of it. That's the only book of his I don't remember much about.
I've also listened or read Undeniable by Bill Nye.
Yeah, I read that one because he came out with that one just like a few months after his debate with Ham. Really wasn't that long after.
And then what I remember I liked was where the talk about if viruses a sister branch to life, like do we branch off of them or they branch off from us?
Yeah, I don't think that that's widely held by researchers currently. I think most researchers think at the moment that they're just bits of genetic material that got a protein coat. And I mean, I think there's some monophyly among a few of them that like these lineages gave birth to other lineages, which is kind of neat to think about. But I don't think that they are proto-organisms in a sense. At least that's what I think.
And the other one was Your Inner Fish by
Neil Shubin.
Yeah,
that's a great one. Yeah, I like that one. He put out another book, another good one, The Universe Within. You read that one?
No, I didn't know about that one yet.
Yeah, it's that one was pretty good. The Universe Within. He talks about kind of the same stuff. He does a lot on like homology, that kind of stuff, and explaining why we have these different parts. And so he kind of went along the same line of Your Inner Fish and explained all these homologous structures and things like that in The Universe Within. It was a neat book. Somewhere in my closet, probably. I was reading recently. I had to put it down for a little while though because it was so dense, or is so dense. Because I was reading The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex by Darwin. I read Origin of Species like 3 years ago.
I've yet to read that book. I gotta pick it up.
It's dry. It's so very dry.
most books are dry unless most research books are dry. They try to make it for kids.
Yeah. But Origin of Species was, I think, neat because I kind of I revered it while I was reading it, and so I
But
didn't really think about how dry it was.
I heard just like different versions of that book. Like,
There are different editions of it. Yeah, he wrote like 8, I think, something like that.
which one did you read?
I read the first one.
Okay.
I try. I A lot of times when researchers or when people quote it, at least that I see, they try to go back and look at the first edition because he added a whole bunch of different stuff to the later editions. Some stuff correct, some stuff he kind of screwed up. Uh, One of the things he did get correct that was because when he wrote the first one, which was in 1859, uh 2 years later Archaeopteryx was discovered, and so he thought that was fascinating because he was like, "Wow, we have this link between reptiles and birds. I'm going to include that one." I think Huxley also drew on that in its comparison to Compsognathus, and talked about how they're both very bird-like, but also dinosaurian and whatnot. And uh, so yeah, it was interesting. It was pretty interesting. Descent of Man, though, I was like almost halfway through it, and I just thought I have to put this down for now. I'll pick it up again, I promise. But
You haven't yet.
I mean, I just started reading Richard Prumm's The Evolution of Beauty, and it's pretty neat. It's kind of along the same lines, interestingly, because they're both about both Descent of Man and The Evolution of Beauty are about sexual selection. So it's really kind of the same thing, but more modernized.
Yeah, that's what I remember that too. Sexual selection, artificial selection, natural selection.
Yeah. Yeah, natural selection is. What's interesting is, sexual selection is really kind of ignored a lot. I think, like from what I remember, in classes, everybody gets a rundown of natural selection. That was the original evolutionary mechanism, and he kind of drew on artificial selection. Darwin did, to make his case for natural selection. He was like,
Yeah, go on.
"Oh, go ahead." Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking. Right. I forget to say it one time. Since natural selection makes organisms survive in the wild, artificial selection makes organisms survive for us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. He was Darwin loved to breed pigeons, and so that was his. And so he drew on pigeons and cattle and dogs, and used that to argue for natural selection. He's like, "Hey, what if nature did the same thing? Wouldn't that be neat?" hey, look at all these examples. and so yeah, he made a pretty compelling case even back in the mid 1800s of natural selection. Of course, it's so conclusive now, it's almost perverse to even argue against it, or it is perverse to even argue against it, which is why creationist organizations accept it wholeheartedly,
Yeah.
And so everybody's kind of on board with that.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was a chapter or section in the. I can't remember correctly, but I think it was the selfish gene. We're talking about the balance between natural and sexual selection, where there's these fish, right? And when there's fish with no predators, they focus more on sexual selection, and the fish got more colorful and bright. The males did, so they could like attract females. But when there's more predators there, they bounce more the natural selection, where the male fish were not as bright. They're a little bit more duller, so they could hide from the fish and still breed.
That was the greatest show on earth, I think.
Oh, maybe
that was the experiment with the guppies. Yeah, I do remember that. And that was fascinating. I really appreciate that kind of research exists out there.
It's funny. It has to be the males, the bright ones, or not, because the females have the babies. So they can't stand out, so they have to hide no matter what.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
To keep that balance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the thing was that was the chapter that was like Before Our Very Eyes or something like that, where he talked about these different examples of recent evolutionary changes, like the elephants losing their tusks, or the lizards of Podmakaru, which was an interesting one.
Maybe it was. I might have been wrong. I can't remember which one is this now. Either Selfish Gene or Great Show on Earth, where they're talking about the different things, where the different birds, or whatever, or animals were like, first the like this type of gene was dominant, and then the one came in that took over, and then like back and forth, like 4 different genes, like back and forth, like birds, whatever, like the nesting, the I forget what this, I forget what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember. I do remember, as far as birds go, talking when he talked about in Selfish Gene was the Chuckoos, how they were, how did the Chuckoos get the ability uh to push out the eggs of the other birds and grow up and all that. And I've actually done a video where I talked about that.
Oh,
Um,
the cuckoo or
yeah,
Checo. I
how do you
heard
pronounce it?
called that before. I've heard it called the Checo before.
All right, cuckoo. Uh, but yeah, he talked about that, and I did a video where I talked a little bit about it. And they're interestingly, birds that nest in large flocks are not easily parasitized by birds like cuckoos.
Like, wait a minute, did I have more? I thought I had more than one egg. Oh well.
Yeah, I mean, and because they have to. Part of it is they have to be able to pick their baby out of a bunch if they're in a social group, right? If they're all nesting together, it's like, hey, is this my baby or is that your baby? And so because they can pick out their eggs and their babies, they're more adept at seeing. They're like, hey, this isn't my egg. What is this egg doing here? Boop. And so they, as opposed to birds who don't nest socially, and they're more likely to be parasitized by cuckoos.
This video looks like. Oh, I saw a video where this this lady gave a hen a duck egg, and the duck hatched it and raised it. Pretty much raised it as its own kid. Try to teach the duck how to peck and stuff.
Right? Yeah. There was a show I watched one time that was, it was like this guy running a zoo in Australia. Some guy running a zoo in Australia, and he has like a baby cassowary, and he puts it with a chicken, right? And the chicken, it does the same thing, teaches it how to peck and all that, because it's teaching this other bird, this even though it's just a little baby of a different species, teaching it, how to be a bird, essentially, how to be social and all that. And so,
Yeah, no, I wonder they do that. Is there, what kind of birds eat chickens, like hawks and stuff?
Yeah.
I wonder if they did that. If they did that for if they had a race of little baby hawk, future predator or chicken hawk, whatever.
They teach the hawk to bring the chickens and hawks together so they can all be friends or something. Focus on the mammals. Something like that. I don't know, but I think that'd be funny. But yeah, it's all very interesting research. Birds are interesting. I really haven't spent a whole lot of time on my channel talking about birds, but they deserve more time, in the little that I've given them, because they're a large group.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't know there's like so many different beyond that between dinosaurs and birds too.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of groups, like the paraaves is a whole group of dinosaurs who are very bird-like. You got like the dromaeosaurs and troodontids, things like that. Somebody decided to come over and say hi. Whoop.
Oh, hey, I guess I'm popular enough to make an appearance now. But I made a joke on, I think it was one of Aaron Rawls' videos, and it's like, Ken Ham was right. There were dinosaurs on the Ark. He released a dove in the chapter that doves are bird, birds are dinosaurs. So there were dinosaurs on the Ark.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. He released a dove. Yep. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's always something I have to point out when I make my videos on dinosaurs. I'm like, I'm not talking about birds.
Like dinosaurs can't think, no, they're not. They're still alive.
Yeah, I've actually gotten like 10 or so messages on my most recent video, because I say at the very beginning, when I say dinosaurs coexisting with humans, I am not talking about birds. And yet I still gotten 10 or so messages of people saying birds are dinosaurs, and I'm like, oh my, I know that. I said so.
But at least they're in the group that realizes that.
Yeah, exactly. concessions. but I still felt like I know I said this already. And they will get a video in my dinosaur phylogeny series. They're coming up pretty soon, actually. I'm just assuming I don't get sidetracked and keep making other videos.
I do that a lot. I'll make this video. I'll make this video now. Oh, a butterfly.
Yeah, I'll do that because someone will send me like a video. They'll say, "Hey, look at this," and I'll see it, and I'll be like, "Oh no, I have to make a video now," or something. And so yeah, I'll have to do that.
Yeah, so many projects, a little time.
Exactly. I have a list of videos I want to make in the future, and I don't even remember what's on the list right now, but because I haven't looked at it recently.
Yeah, I have so many games I want to play. I want to play for my Let's Play series, but I haven't got to I've only gotten to 2 of them so far, like 10 of them. It's going to start growing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's pretty much what I do. I have my list, and then just keeps growing.
Have you ever played the game Spore?
Yeah, I played it. I think through most of microbiology. I should have been listening to the lecture, but
Yeah. Too bad there's too bad there's not that more steps between the cell stage and the land stage. You know, like little like cell stage and the fish stage and a
right.
But yeah, oh yeah. I used to play when I was in school. Since listening and doing homework, I used to play Oregon Trail and Carmen Sandiego a lot in the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember Oregon Trail. I think
those were my games.
Yeah.
Like those old Apple computers.
I've got a few games. I've been playing Assassin's Creed 3 recently on my PS3. It's pretty fun. I think it's a pretty neat game.
So what game are you most interested in coming out if you play games?
Kingdom Hearts. That's all I want.
Me too. I still got to pre-order it. Or it's coming on the shelf. But yeah, that's the game I've been waiting for. Kingdom Hearts 3.
That's literally the only thing I want. I don't ask for much, but that's what I want.
If you ever seen it, we did a whole episode about Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you a link sometime. But something else you want to talk about? I'm like my brain. Well, I do. I think I do. I don't. But right now my brain can't think of anything.
I don't know. I mean, well, like I said, my friend RJ Downard and I are working on a book where we're critiquing creationism, and we hope to have that out by next year, but we're not sure about that. So I do hope that will happen.
Yeah, I've been trying to write this book forever, a book series, but just my procrastination and my distractionist is keeping me.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah, mine's more of a fictional book, not yours. Yours is obviously nonfiction, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's got a lot of creationism in it, so there's quite a bit of fiction in there. And I have to thank creationists because, to borrow from Tony Reed, they teach me real science, you know, in a sense. And so I learned about these interesting subjects that I wouldn't have known about otherwise because they brought them up, and I had to look up, you know, why is this wrong? Why is my cat in my face? Go away.
I saw a video of that, like why vicious killers make good pets.
Exactly. Yeah. But we've already been through several chapters in the Answers books because all the chapters we're dissecting involve evolutionary biology, paleontology, and geology. And so we're going through those and explaining why they're wrong and why they ignore all this data and whatnot. And it's really interesting because creationists, as RJ has shown, ignore like 90% of the data. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. They literally do miss about 90% of the technical data.
Because if it's not in the Bible, it can't be true.
Right, exactly. When I read like a Bodhi Hodges section, which he talks about, or one of his sections, it talks about mutations. and he just kind of dismisses the evolution of the lung. He says, it requires new information. There's no way new information could come about, so it didn't happen. And that's it.
And then, yeah, back to the Aaron Ross videos where I found out that bladder back in before the lung existed became the little swim bladder thing, and the early bony fishes might have become the lung.
Well, yeah, these pockets in the esophagus developed, which were good for trapping oxygen, which helped oxygenate the heart. That was an early bony fish, and then it became the lung. It became the lung, and then it closed off in later bony fish to form the swim bladder. And so our lung is homologous to their swim bladder, although a few basal fish still retain lungs, essentially, or a version of the lung, like what are they called? Bichers or bikers, whatever people call them, Bichir. These little fish, and there's some really interesting research with how they can move across land if you expose them to more terrestrial environments early on in their development. They develop fins more like lobe fin fish instead of like ray fin fish, but they also have lungs, right? And a few other fish have independently developed little kind of convergent lungs like betas and things like that because they have this thing called the labyrinth, or in this clade called anabantoidy, where gouramis, betas, they have a lung-like organ which allows them to breathe, so they can breathe air for a short time, especially if they're in low oxygenated water. And so all research that flies under the creationist radar, I mean, there's just so much stuff, and they just don't even look at it, and it's pathetic. It really is. But that's just me. So,
Yeah.
But I don't know if you're ready to go, then we can go.
Yeah. Sometimes it's harder when the two people are talking. It's like that. It's like I have to have more people sometimes. Like keep the conversation going a bit. But sometimes it's one or two people. Like you run out of things to talk about.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, now we're going to cover politics. No. But
I hope you can come back later on in the future when you have free time.
Absolutely, I have a lot of free time. I just do. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Well, next week, join us next week. We're going to have Tony Reed on from How Creation Taught Me Real Science. He'll be on here next week, so be sure to check him out. Check out Jackson Reed's channel. I'll link in the description. I'll read it. I'll put the description in the link below. Link in the description below. And as I always say, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We'll see you next time. Bye.